LSAC just admitted in writing they can't fix a problem with the new LSAT. And I'm going to read you their exact words in a minute. But here's what they're really saying. The new LSAT is going to be slower to take than the current one, and they know it, but there's nothing they're going to do about it. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005. I've never seen LSAC publish anything quite like this. And if you're taking the LSAT in August or September or beyond, this will affect every question that you answer. It's one of only 3 announcements they announced yesterday that you've got to know about. The first announcement is the exception rules to in-person testing. And of course, the in-person move itself is not news. LSAC announced that back in February. What's new is who exactly still gets to take the LSAT from home, and they just announced those exceptions. The first one is distance. You qualify for remote testing if you live more than 180 miles from the nearest testing center or more than 3 hours travel time. Either one gets you into remote testing. You don't need both. You'll send LSAC documentation showing the distance or the travel time, and they will approve or deny your request. The second one is medical or disability accommodations. You qualify if you have an approved accommodation that a prometric testing center literally cannot provide. And of course, having an accommodation alone isn't enough. The accommodation itself has to be something that the physical testing center cannot deliver. LSAC will review these case by case. Now, if either exception applies to you, you will apply through LSAC after you sign up. And either you get approved for remote exception or you're stuck taking it in person. But know that even if you get approved for remote testing, you are under heightened security. You've got a live human proctor for the entire test. And if neither exception applies, of course, you're back to testing in person, which means the next piece of news I'm going to share matters even more because LSAC just rolled out a brand new scheduling system. And this one was buried in their blog post, but it matters a lot. It's a total overhaul of how you actually book your testing center. The new system uses a register order to set your scheduling window. And so when you register for the LSAT, LSAC slots you into a window based on when you registered for the test. If you register early, you get an earlier scheduling window. If you register late, you get a later scheduling window. About 4 weeks before test day, you get an email and a text when your window opens. Then you log into Prometric's Pro Scheduler tool and you pick your test center, your testing day, and your time slot from whatever's left. And of course, the whatever's left part is the catch. The people who registered earlier already booked the prime time slots at the best centers in your area. The longer you wait to register, the worse your options are going to be. And so if you're testing for the LSAT in August, register today, don't wait. Every day you wait pushes you down the line. And if you end up with a testing slot that doesn't match when you actually perform best, of course, you're going to take a hit. Now, the second big announcement I want to share is about the LSAT testing interface, the user interface for the online LSAT. They just published a detailed update about the new test interface, including changes they've already made since the March demo and with what's coming up in June. Of course, the content of the LSAT is not changing. Same types of questions in logical reasoning and reading comp, but what's getting rebuilt is the software, the layout, the navigation system, the buttons. The highlighting and underlining tools, for example, in the March demo, they took them away completely, which of course broke a core reading comp strategy for a lot of folks because you couldn't mark up the language in the passage or the choices. Everybody hated it. And so yesterday, LSAC officially committed to bringing them back in their June UI release, fully functional across the entire passage, the stimulus, the question stem, and the choices. That was the biggest reversal. They did respond to requests, which I think is good of them. They also made some changes to the question bar because in the March demo, you could only see 10 question numbers at the bottom of the screen, and students hated that because you couldn't see your pacing at a glance. And so yesterday, LSAC confirmed the full section now shows in the bar with new separators in reading comp marking which questions belong to which passage, which is actually an upgrade over the current interface we've had for the past couple of years. They've also committed to bringing back flagging so you can easily see flagged questions in the question bar in the upcoming June release. You can scan them at a glance without clicking into each one. They've also added a new reset response button, meaning with one click, you can clear all your selections and eliminations on a question. And they flagged a known bug they're fixing in the upcoming June release. You can also adjust the font size. The timer features are now back in, and most of that's good or actually an improvement. But there is actually one specific change LSAC has now officially admitted they cannot fix, and that's the third piece of news I want to share today. That's the one that matters the most. And these are LSAC's exact words from the latest announcement, quote, due to the underlying structure of the new test driver platform, moving from answer selection to answer elimination will require an extra click. We are not able to provide radio button functionality with a single click, end quote. In the current interface, you click an icon next to an answer to cross it out. With one click, you're done. You click again to bring it back. In the new interface, that is gone. To cross out an answer, you toggle into something LSAC is calling answer masking mode. Your cursor changes, then you click the answer you want masked. Then you toggle back out of masking mode to select your final answer. So one click to eliminate is now a toggle, a click, and another toggle on every elimination, on every question. I know these terms sound kind of silly, toggle, masking, all that. It's a lot more clear if you actually log into the LSAC site yourself. You can play with their demo interface for free. But bottom line, the LSAT's gone through a lot of changes over the past 6-7 years now, ever since pre-pandemic days. Actually went from being on paper to on a tablet in 2019 to remote in 2020 with the pandemic. Now they're back to in-person with a new testing platform. And I've never seen them publish an admission like the one they just put out. They're telling you in writing, the new test is going to be slower to take, and there's nothing they're going to do about it. And the LSAT is strictly timed, so this matters. In logical reasoning, you're solving 26 questions in 35 minutes, about 1 minute and 24 seconds per question. But you want to move through the easier first 10 in roughly 10 minutes, so you've got more time on average for the tougher questions later in this section. And so on those tougher questions, you're adding multiple toggles, for lack of a better word, per question. So conservatively speaking, that's 1 minute or 2 through the entire section, costing you an entire question, maybe 2. And on a test when the gap between a 170 and a 175 is just 1 or 2 questions, it could cost you serious time. So what do you actually do with all of this, considering the changes with the remote testing, in person, the user interface issues? First, for the testing, remote versus in person, think about where you live, your location. Might you qualify for an exception to the in-person requirement? Again, if you live more than 180 miles or 3 hours from a testing center, you want to start your documentation today. Same goes for if you have medical documentation, medical accommodation at a Prometric center that they can't deliver on. Don't wait till after you register. Then if you're taking the LSAT in August, sign up right now, because the longer you wait, the worse your scheduling window is going to be, the worse the slots you're going to have. That's the most important thing you can do right now. Then once you are registered, think about where your Prometric center is located. Figure out how long it's going to take to get there. Figure out the parking situation. Think about what it's going to look like inside there. You're going to have pencils, scratch paper, a workstation inside a cubicle, an on-site proctor. They're going to have lockers for your phone and your bag. Bring water, a snack for the break, a government-issued ID. You're going to show up early. And then when the final user interface shows up next month, you want to take a timed exam with that new software. And think about what the format's like for you, how might you need to adjust your test-taking experience accordingly. Then think through what your elimination strategy is going to be like, given that on the new interface, every answer choice elimination takes you more time. And remember that when you're studying, of course, logical reasoning is 2/3 of your test, because it's 2 of the 3 scored sections. So any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning will be doubled across the 2 sections. And know that, of course, if you're taking the LSAT in August or beyond, don't take your LSAT practice tests out of books. Don't take them on unofficial third-party platforms, because you want to get familiar with this new interface given the upcoming changes. And I know some of you are thinking maybe you're going to take it in October or November, push back your test a bit, let LSAC clean up all the bugs in the software. But the new interface is the new interface. They're not going back. Same deal with in-person testing. That is the new normal. And there are benefits to applying earlier in the cycle. If you delay your LSAT, you're delaying your applications. And LSAT law school admissions is conducted on a rolling basis, meaning The earlier you apply, the easier it is to get in, and the more scholarship money is available as well. And so if you take the LSAT in August, you get your score back end of August. You apply the second that application's open in September when it's easier to get in, and there's also more scholarship money available as well. And if you want my help preparing for the new LSAT, preparing for the new interface, getting ready to take it in person, giving it all these changes, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering a free LSAT tutoring lesson for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me personally is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I'm also happy to take any questions on anything at all, LSAT and law school admissions. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I will get to as many of them as I can. For those of you just joining, by the way, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find these lives helpful, please do me a favor and spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost these because they can't run ads during these. And so I do appreciate your support, spreading the word, sharing this to your socials on TikTok or in any group chats or Facebook groups or subreddits or Discords that you're part of. The more this grows, the more I'll expand this over time. Now I see some questions here in the chat. I'll get to as many of them as I can. I see Brian's asking, how long is the LSAT roughly speaking? So the LSAT is 4 scored sections. Each one is 35 minutes. You're doing 2 sections back to back, a 10-minute break, then 2 more sections back to back, and that's your test. And so 35 times 4 plus 10, we're looking at roughly 2.5 hours in one sitting, assuming standard timing. Of course, some folks get extra time, some folks get extra breaks with accommodations. And so if you have time and a half, could be 4 hours. If you have double time, could be 5 hours. And so the dark side of accommodations is that while it could help with pacing, it also makes for a longer test sitting. And so endurance becomes a more important factor. And if you are taking with accommodations or not, of course, we will adjust your study plan accordingly, help you simulate test day accordingly to account for all of that, to help you build up your endurance or work on your pacing, whatever the case may be. Hair of Witchery, thank you for what you do. Awesome. No, I appreciate the support. Glad you're finding it all helpful. Elvin's asking, I plan to start law school in 2027. What's the latest I should take the LSAT? So if you want to start law school in 2027, that means you want to apply in fall of 2026, which is coming up in just a couple of months. And so the earliest I would take the LSAT if you're starting now would be August, because that gives you roughly 2.5 months. You can apply as soon as applications open in the fall. The latest I would take the LSAT would be February. And so if we look at that entire span of time, you've got LSATs coming up in August, September, October, November, January, and February. And applying early matters less than it used to. The cycle has extended over time. And so the January and February LSATs are not too late, but they are the latest that I would recommend taking the LSAT. And as I said, when you apply earlier, it's easier to get in, and there's also more scholarship money available. So I would recommend applying earlier and taking the LSAT earlier if you can. And speaking now in May, of course, it's totally possible to take the LSAT sooner than February, and I'd try to knock it out this fall if at all possible. See more questions here. Ty's asking, is it ever justified to go into debt for a top 14 law school instead of being debt-free for a non-T14? Yeah, I mean, listen, if the question is, should I take a full ride and pay 0 tuition at a tier 4 law school, or should I go to Harvard Law paying full price? I think that there's a good argument for going to Harvard Law, even if you got to pay full price, because Harvard Law is going to open doors that other law schools won't open for you, right? And so if you want to go into big law, if you want to work in a clerkship, if you want to go into academia, going to a Harvard or Yale or Stanford might be a better move. A lot of the T14 have great big law placement. They'll get you into big law positions where they have really great starting salaries. For example, at Cravath, they're paying $225,000 to first-year associates. You're not going to get that kind of outcome from a tier 4 law school. And so if you want to go into a high-paying job, the top-tier law school might be the better path. But there are many professions where the top 14 might not make sense, depending on what you want to do with the degree. So consider what specific law school career goals you have, and then work backwards from there to decide what kind of law school you want to go to. I see Clarabelle's asking, my diagnostic score was a 134. Have you seen people reach a 155 plus in 3 months from a low score like mine? Yeah, so you're asking, can I improve 20 points in 3 months? The answer is definitely yes, especially if you want to go from 134 to 155. It's a lot easier to improve from the 130s to the 150s than from the 150s to the 170s. And basically, when you're at a 134, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of foundational work to be done. And so there's a lot of easy pickings there, essentially. When you're at a 134, there are significant foundational gaps that we can close up pretty quickly. If we can correct misconceptions regarding common question types, there's a pretty easy score boost to be had, a lot of low-hanging fruit. And so we just do some targeted foundational work. In contrast, when you're in the 160s, for example, you're not necessarily getting questions wrong because of the question stem types. And so the gaps in foundation are harder to close. They take more targeted, more personalized support. That being said, we can help you out regardless of where you're at. We always look at what's your starting point, what's your goal, and what's your time frame. If you're taking the LSAT in just a week or two, for those taking it in June, for example, we're going to have to take a more intensive boot camp style approach, and essentially engaging in triage, looking at what are the biggest gaps we can correct as quickly as possible. If you're taking the LSAT in August, September, October, November, we've got more time to take a more slow and steady approach, building the foundation first, then moving on to individual timed sections, finally pulling it all together with full-length timed exams. And so we always personalize the program to the student for those asking about what our programs look like, what they cost. Again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We always customize the program to meet your needs and your goals and your time frame. So if you want to talk it through, the best way to figure out the best plan of action for you is for you to book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally. You can book that free lesson at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. Happy to help you out. I also see a question about asking, do you think admissions will value the LSAT in person more than the online LSAT? No, they won't. Law schools don't care which format LSAT you took it in. They're honestly not even going to know. It's not going to disclose on your score report whether you took it in person or online. And like, for example, if you're taking the LSAT in June, they're not going to know if you took it in person or online. And of course, if you take it August or beyond, they could assume in most cases that you took it in person, but they're not going to know, because what if you live remotely? What if you have medical accommodations? They're not going to know that. And so they can never really assume, and they have no incentive to really care, because law schools are not evaluated based on the location of your LSAT. They only are evaluated based on the score that you achieve. So that's what matters. Just like they didn't care whether you took the LSAT with logic games or without logic games, or they haven't cared whether you took it in person or remote for the past couple of years, and they haven't known, they're not going to know going forward either. And so don't even worry about it. Just focus on understanding the material and getting the highest score possible. I see Jasdeep is asking, what is the minimum score to get into a U.S. law school? There's no one-size-fits-all answer on this, because there are approximately 200 different law schools. Each one has its own unique medians. It's their own unique requirements. A higher-ranked law school like a Harvard, Yale, Stanford, a top-ranked school, their LSAT medians range from 170 to 174 or so. But there are plenty of super low-ranked law schools where their medians are in the 140s or 150s. And so the question is not, what would it take to get into a law school? The question is more, what would it take to get into a law school worth attending? And then you also could look at, what's your undergraduate GPA? If your GPA is low, you're going to have to balance it out with a relatively higher LSAT score to compensate. But the good news is that law schools generally treat your LSAT score with more weight than your undergraduate GPA. And so a higher LSAT can offset a lower GPA. So regardless, my answer typically remains the same. Just focus on what you can control, which at this later stage is getting the highest LSAT score possible to maximize your outcomes. I see Owen's asking, do you think there will be any more major changes to the LSAT in the next 5 to 10 years? Good question. I mean, there have been a lot of changes to the LSAT over the past 5-10 years. It went from being in person on paper back in early 2019 to on a tablet for about 6 months in the second half of 2019 to on a computer remotely at the beginning of the pandemic with the shorter 3-section LSAT Flex format, then to 4 sections, and then the removal of logic games, and now remote, that back to in-person. So lots and lots of changes. I couldn't have expected most of them. There is still one upcoming change that nobody's really talking about yet, but they will be in the next year or two, which is LSAC scoring the writing sample. We'll hear a lot more about this in the next year, I expect. But basically, LSAC has commented a couple of times that they are exploring scoring the writing sample sometime in the next couple of years. They've even added a field to the LSAT score report called the writing ability score. And for now, of course, that field is blank because they are not scoring the writing sample, but LSAC doesn't go around adding fields to score reports for no reason. They are tinkering with the idea of scoring it in the next couple of years because law schools are really pushing for this. The LSAT's never had a scored writing portion. The writing sample has always been unscored, but law schools are in a tight spot because they rely on application essays to evaluate applicants' writing ability. And now with ChatGPT and similar, there is no way they can really trust that you wrote your own application essays. And of course, there have always been the few who can afford admissions consultants, but now ChatGPT has democratized access to writing support for free, essentially. And so now that everybody can edit their writing and get feedback on it very easily with fairly high quality feedback, even if what it generates tends to be pretty generic, they need an alternative. And so probably in the next year or two, either starting in July of next year or the following year, they'll probably score it. That's the biggest change I see coming. Tom is asking, my first full-length real exam was a 161. Should I just apply or grind for a 165 to 168? I would grind. 4 points more or 7 points more, that's going to have a significant impact on where you can get into law school and where you can get scholarship money from as well. And that's even more true considering that we're only in May now. So my question would be, why wouldn't you study hard this summer, take it in August? You could still apply. The second application's open in September. It wouldn't even delay your applications. The goal that you are proposing here is well worth shooting for. If you were asking, should I study a lot to improve just 1 point? I'd say maybe not compared to what else you could be doing. The question is always, what's the opportunity cost? I'm always going to recommend that you retake if you think you can do better, though, of course. And if you think that you've got it into you to improve 4 to 7 points, a 168 is going to get you much better outcomes than a 161. And I have a hard time thinking about something else you could do that would be equally impactful. And to Jade's questions here, law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take into consideration the highest LSAT score on your record. And so there's no downside to retaking. If you do better, great. If you do worse, no big deal. The highest score is what ultimately counts. Pontiac's asking, is a law school ranked below 100 worth it? I'll answer your question with a question, which would be, at what price? So things are not, broadly speaking, worth it or not worth it. It's worth it relative to the cost that you would be paying for it. I mean, you could ask, is a Lamborghini worth it? If you're paying sticker price, full retail, maybe not. If your friend is going to gift it to you for $1 as a token exchange, is it worth $1? Yeah, I would say so. I would take that trade. And so the question is, worth it at what price? If you can go to that law school for free and pay $0, get a full ride on the basis of strong numbers, then yeah, maybe it's worth it. If you're paying a sticker price, if you're paying full retail, if you're paying full tuition, then probably not. So a law school is worth it or not worth it relative to what you pay for it. And most law schools probably are not worth it if you're paying the full sticker tuition, but the truth is that most people actually don't pay full sticker tuition, believe it or not. It's like a little known secret in law school admissions, and you can actually see the scholarships that law schools are giving out in the American Bar Association 509 reports. Nobody looks these up, but they're available to you for free. Just Google X Law School 509 and you'll be able to look up the LSAT medians, the GPA medians, what percentage of students get scholarships that are conditional or non-conditional, how many lose their scholarships, and you'll get a sense of who's actually, like how many people are actually paying the retail price. And if you can get a significant discount on the tuition, if you can get a full ride, then some law schools become pretty good values. Of course, you want to consider what are their bar passage rates, what are their employment outcomes, and that can help you make a more informed decision as to whether the typical outcomes are ones that you're looking for, and if you can expect a good outcome. Christina's asking, what is the most efficient way to tackle a reading comp question? So my question to you back would be, how are you currently approaching reading comp? Where can we help you level up your accuracy or reduce the time that you're investing? I find that most students spend way too long highlighting, underlining, note taking on reading comp. And the problem is that it takes a long time to write things down, takes a long time to read things. The highlighting and underlying tools are kind of glitchy and imprecise. And so I recommend steering clear of them, not being overly reliant on them. In terms of time allocation, I would recommend spending roughly 2.5 to 3 minutes on your initial read of the passage. You want to save up enough time that you can apply to the questions associated with the passages. So I've talked time allocation up front, then we also have the order in which you approach the questions. I would group the questions in reading comp into 3 major buckets: global, big picture questions, local, detail questions, and then finally, inferential questions that require a bit of reading between the lines. And I would approach them in this order. In other words, knock out the global big picture questions first, like main idea, primary purpose, passage organization, title, tone, author's opinion. Knock those out first. Then the detailed questions, knock those out next. And finally, save the more inferential questions for last because they require more reading between the lines and they're tougher in general. And you want to talk through particulars with me. You can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. We can talk through it live on a call. The link to book that free tutoring with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. Selena is saying, first time here. Thank you for your knowledge. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Glad you're finding it all helpful. See, Christina, you're saying that you're reading so much info. That's you. Awesome. So we've got time and space to change your approach there. And the cool thing is that if you change your approach, you will get a higher score. You get a few more points without actually having to do anything. And sometimes it's what you stop doing that leads to your results, which is a pretty nice win. I see a question. Are you primarily focused on American law schools? Yeah, I am. And so that's really my area of knowledge and expertise. I don't know as much about law schools in other countries. I'm really focused on helping people get into the best US law schools. I know that the LSAT is offered and used in other countries as well, but the US is really my main focus. That's where I know the most about when it comes to admissions as well. Scanning through for other questions here. Feel free to keep them coming, folks. Apologies if I missed anything. There's a lot going on in the chat here. See, Jasdeep's asking, what's a US law school worth going to? Something near New York. I would recommend doing more research. I mean, there's 200 different American Bar Association approved law schools. Each one has different requirements in terms of getting in. Each one has different areas of specialization. Each one has different outcomes in terms of bar passage rates and employment outcomes. And so I wouldn't ask the question, if you're asking which law school should I go to, I would counter that you have not yet done enough research. I would think about a couple things. On one end, you have, what do you want to do with your law degree? What kind of law do you want to practice? You could then say to yourself, okay, well, I want to go into big law, or I want to go into immigration law, or I want to go into environmental law. Then you can start saying, okay, well, what are the best law schools to get me the outcomes that I'm looking for? If you want to go into big law, you can look at which law schools have the best big law placement. For example, I think Columbia Law is near the top for big law placement. You can look at which law schools are top ranked for environmental law, or which law schools are top ranked for immigration law, or going into academia or clerkships. That's one way to handle it. Another way to look at it is say to yourself, you know what? I'm geographically constrained. I don't want to relocate. I have family obligations that keep me where I am, or I want to, or I don't want to have to move just for convenience. I want to go locally. Or I want to keep working full-time and go to law school part-time with a part-time program. And so you say, okay, well, then I'm regionally constrained. What are the law schools within a reasonable commuting radius of, say, 1.5 hours max? And you draw a big circle on the map around where you live and you see, what can I commute to? And if it's nothing good commuting-wise, then you say, okay, well, I want to go to an online program or a hybrid program. What are the online hybrid programs available to me? And you work backwards from that. But if you're saying what law schools are available to me based on my numbers, to me, that's not the right approach necessarily. But think about, what's your GPA? What's your LSAT score? Where are you competitive in terms of your geography and in terms of getting you the best job outcomes for what you want to do with your law degree? But if you want something near upstate New York, for example, you could look at Buffalo. You could look at Syracuse. Just speaking broadly without a whole lot of knowledge to it. And if you're in New York City, where I'm from, then of course you have a dozen different options, some high ranked like Columbia and NYU, some lower ranked like Cardozo or Brooklyn Law or Toro or Hofstra, for example. And you can also think to yourself, if you're in New York City, you can also look at schools in Jersey, for example, that are, or Connecticut, that are commutable for you. So I hope that helps, but I would do more research and think about hitting it from those different angles. Sleep is saying they added the new LSAT interface to all tests on Law Hub to drop the news. Yep, yeah, that's a pretty exciting announcement. I mentioned this earlier. I posted it on socials as well, but for those who are not aware, if you're taking the LSAT in August or beyond, LSAC has dropped the new LSAT interface for anyone taking the LSAT in August or beyond. They've added it for all 60 LSAT practice tests in the official Law Hub platform. You can see them right now. As I mentioned, there are some unfortunate interface constraints with the new format, but something to look at in there. If you want to see what it's like already, you can look at that. Selena's asking, last night was my first time studying, and I'm so proud of my outcome on my first practice. I passed the first 10 questions. Conditional statements. Awesome, Selena. Congrats at your first attempt at looking at LSAT questions. That's definitely promising. You're on the right track there. Keep at it. If you need anything, of course, you can grab the free LSAT cheat sheet linked below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. That's a quick reference covering every LSAT section, every LSAT question type in both logical reasoning and reading comprehension. Jerry Pickles is saying, my testing center is 3 hours away, but I'm scared of the remote exam because of possible tech issues. Am I overthinking? Sadly, no, I think you're not overthinking. There have been a lot of tech issues and remote proctoring issues with the remote LSAT, and so that is one reason I think it's better, all else being equal, to take the LSAT in person. Why I think it could be a blessing in disguise that LSAC is returning to in-person testing for virtually everybody starting in August. And so my thought would be, if you don't like the idea of taking it remotely, then commute to take it in person. And I know that 3 hours is a pretty significant commute, but given the importance of the LSAT, it might be worth just sucking it up and going to take it in person. Megan's asking, when should I start studying for my LSAT? Well, my question back to you would be, when are you planning on taking your LSAT, and when do you want to apply to law school? I recommend a minimum of 2 to 3 months studying for the LSAT, ideally 5 to 6 months to reach your fullest potential. Of course, you can do it in less than 5 to 6 months, but given the importance of the LSAT, it might be worth giving it a bit more time, depending on what you want to do in terms of getting into better law schools, getting more scholarship money. So I'd recommend, for the best outcomes, giving yourself at least a couple of months. Coming up, we've got the LSAT in August, September, October, November this calendar year. The June LSAT, of course, is in a week or two. That's a bit too late to start studying for that now, but you've got a lot more options available to you. And I would start now if you can. Take a practice test, see where you're at. Use it as a baseline only, as a benchmark from which you can measure your later future progress. And if you want to talk through what your study plan could look like, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. That's an open offer to everybody watching this now or later, by the way. You can book it at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I see Sleep is asking, how are they going to do the LSAT in person if they have so many people signing up? That's a really good question. So LSAC has partnered with the testing company Prometric that has in-person testing centers all over the world. And so they're going to have you go into these centers over the course of typically 3 to 4 days, from early in the morning till late at night. You'll be able to book a specific day and time for your LSAT based on when you sign up and register for the LSAT. And so you're going to want to book it earlier so that you're not stuck with a bad day and time. Those who book earlier are going to get more desirable times. Those who book it later are going to get worse times. And you might need to commute an hour or two at least to take the LSAT in person if the convenient ones get booked up fast. Justin is asking, I got a 174 on the LSAT, have a 382 GPA from Yale. I'm going to apply this cycle. Should I try for Yale Law School? Yeah, I would. I mean, you've got a great LSAT score. A 174 is at their median. A 382 is a little bit below their median, but you're not that far off. And so I'd say shoot your shot. The worst they could say is no. I wouldn't apply only to Yale. I would cast a wider net. You never want to have one-itis when it comes to applying to law school or anything in life for that matter, but I would blanket the T14. Why not? I mean, you're within spitting distance on the GPA. For those who aren't aware, the T14 GPA medians range from 392 to 399, and so a 382 is a bit below on the GPA front, but just with a 174 is a bit higher on the LSAT side for most of the T14 LSAT medians, and so it's worth shooting your shot. It's not that far off. Just scanning through here for more questions for anything I missed. P's asking, I have a 165 LSAT, 2.9 GPA, 2.7 LSAC GPA, and tier 2 softs, including military service. What do you think? So the LSAC GPA is ultimately what matters, unfortunately. 2.7 is on the lower side, of course. 165 LSAT is a, broadly speaking, decent LSAT score. But in order to offset the lower GPA, I'd want you to shoot for a higher LSAT score if you can. It's worth shooting higher to offset that GPA. The military service is nice, but a soft is a soft, of course. The numbers are ultimately what matters when it comes to law school admission, so I would say push for the 170 plus. And I say this now knowing that we're in May, where you've still got 3.5 months till applications open. And so if you could go hard at the LSAT this summer, take it in August or September, ideally, you can still apply pretty early in this cycle, and you'll still have pretty good chances of getting into a good school. I don't know what your goals are, of course, and that's a missing piece of this equation as well. But just to, broadly speaking, get you better outcomes, I would shoot for a higher LSAT to offset what's a relatively lower GPA. Ava's asking, I scored a 142 on my diagnostic. Is it possible to get to the 160s by October? Yes, it's possible. The question is, what are you going to do to get there? Right? I mean, to improve 20, 25 points in 4.5, 5 months, absolutely. Why couldn't you do that? It's totally reasonable to improve that much. And of course, it's easier to go from a 142 to a 162 than from a 155 to a 175, right? The lower you are, the higher it is to go up. There's a lot more low-hanging fruit when you're starting lower, and so we just work on your foundation to start with. And if the 142 diagnostic is a cold diagnostic, that especially is the case because the cold diagnostic just tells you that you haven't yet learned the language of the LSAT, but of course you can learn it. You can improve significantly. It just tells you that you have not yet put in the work yet, but of course there is plenty you can do to get that score up significantly. We just got to give you a strong foundation in the different sections, in the different question types. In logical reasoning, for example, you've got 15 different types of questions, including strength and weak and flaw, necessary assumption, sufficient assumption, and so on. There's also reading comp to work on. That's a whole third of the test. Then there's pacing and time management, doing individual sections, and full-length exams to build up your endurance. There's a lot to cover, but we've got time. Of course, you're not taking the LSAT tomorrow. For any of you taking the LSAT in August, September, October, November, or even beyond, we can certainly put together a personalized plan for you to get you from your starting point up to your goal score over that time frame. In our personal coaching programs, we create for you a custom study plan, laying out exactly what to do every single day from now till your test. We set you up with private coaching, ideally once or twice a week at least. You also get live small group classes in the evenings, but they're all optional and all recorded for any that you can't make live. And you also get a comprehensive on-demand course as well. And for those asking about the details, of course, we personalize every program to the individual student, considering your goals and your time frame. If you want to talk it through with me, you could book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link's below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab that at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Link is below the video and pinned in the chat as well. For those just joining, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find these helpful, please do me a favor and spread the word. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. And the LSAT's kind of a niche topic, not the sexy. So I'm not dancing on these lives or doing anything like that. I'm not trying to cater to the algorithm in any way. I'm just really answering questions on LSAT and law school admissions as straightforwardly as I can, because I think it's helpful to folks to address their concerns and help you get your scores up and share some knowledge that I've gained over the past 20 years of doing this. And so I do appreciate your support. I'll try to answer a couple more questions here. Mr. SJ News asking, what is the best resource for the most realistic practice exams? I mean, there's a lot of junk AI generated practice questions out there. Don't do that. Don't make up your own with a ChatGPT, please. There are 8,000 or so real official LSAT practice questions that were actually given on real previously administered LSAT practice tests. You can get those on the LSAC Law Hub platform. The LSAC is the Law School Admission Council. They are the people who make the LSAT, and they're pretty good at what they do. They have released 4 practice tests for free on their Law Hub platform, and you can get the others with a Law Hub Advantage subscription, well worth the investment. If you have a fee waiver based on financial need, they'll give it to you for free. I would only do practice questions out of there. Aside from the actual questions being accurate and realistic, they are also getting you familiar with the software that you'll be using to take the official LSAT. A lot of folks using these random websites or AI questions are not getting familiar with the software. You certainly don't want to be using books for your practice questions because the LSAT is not offered on paper. And these third-party unofficial platforms don't reflect the actual test day software or the test day experience. As I was mentioning earlier, the LSAT is changing format, changing the interface yet again. And so the only way, the best way to get familiar with the interface is to actually study with it using the demo software that LSAC has rolled out, and they've just applied it to all the practice tests on their software on lawhub.org. So I would study there, nowhere else for your practice questions. The thing, of course, is that the LSAC Law Hub doesn't come with explanations for most questions. And of course, there's nobody that you could talk to or get feedback from on what you're getting wrong and why you're getting it wrong. And so that's where we come in offering the personalized coaching. And so if you want to talk through what a personalized program could look like to help you reach your goals, you can book the free tutoring with me. The links in my bio, links in the description. We could talk through it more. unpluggedprep.com/start. I see Juice is asking, how bad is a 156 LSAT with a 3.9 GPA? I'm never going to say that a number is bad or good. It's really relative to what your goals are. And so will the 156 LSAT and the 3.9 GPA help you achieve what you want to do with your law degree? Will it help you achieve success in law school admissions? So I say numbers are good or bad relative to achieving your goals. And so if we look at what law schools do you want to go to, will those numbers help you get in? Will they help you get scholarship money? It's an objective question we can ask. It's not a values question. It's just a question of results. And so what I'll say is that, in my opinion, the law schools that are worth going to, meaning the law schools with above average bar passage rates, above average employment outcomes, and on top of that, the law schools that will give you significant scholarship money and also have good outcomes, will they accept you and give you scholarships with those numbers? The 3.9 GPA is incredibly useful to achieving those outcomes. The 156 LSAT will, frankly speaking, detract from your achieving those goals if that's what you're looking for. And there are some people who don't need scholarship money, some people who are happy to take out the loans or just pay cash for law school. Those folks are, of course, financially unique and above average, financially speaking. But if you want scholarship money, and you also want scholarship money going to better law schools, you're probably going to want to have a higher LSAT score than 156. If you could get 5-10 points more, you're going to have way better outcomes. And so my advice to you, if you are in the position of wanting scholarship money for better ranked law schools, then I would say go for a retake and aim to score 10 points higher. Aim for a 166. You've got 2.5 months till the August LSAT. You can take the August LSAT and apply to law school in early September. In other words, you could still retake it in August and apply the second that applications open in the fall. And so that would be my advice to you. If those are your goals, I'd say retake in August, go at it hard this summer, the next 2.5 months, and apply September 1st. Nomad, I'm glad to hear that the resources have been helpful. That's awesome to hear. Sam's asking, what about a 154 with a 3.49 GPA? Okay, so now we're talking about below average LSAT and below average GPA in terms of achieving these goals. The previous question or previous commenter had a 3.9 GPA. Now we're talking about a 154 LSAT with a 3.49 GPA. Those numbers are both going to be on the lower side. So I would say if you're still in college, focus on raising up that GPA. Try to have that upward trajectory with your classes in terms of getting higher grades. If you're already out of college, we can't change the GPA, but we can change the LSAT score. And so in this case, even more so, it would be more important to retake the LSAT and get 10, 15, 20 points higher if possible. Not saying it's easy, not saying it's going to happen overnight, but it becomes relatively more important to get a higher LSAT score when your GPA is on the lower side. Thanks for joining, folks. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. I'll see you all then. Thanks for joining. In the meantime, all the best. Take care.